Hello and welcome to episode 1 of The Crossover, brought to you by Beyond the Big Ten, where we discuss basketball all around the Big Ten. Welcome to the first episode of The Crossover. I am Jon Sauber, joined by my nitty-gritty partner, Tim Frazier. Tim, how we doing?
Man, I'm good, man. How about you?
I'm doing good. It's not been that long since we talked to talk some Penn State basketball, but I'm excited to start something new here, right? To start talking about the conference as a whole. We'll be bringing this to you every week. Won't always be Tim and I, but we'll be here talking about Big Ten basketball, talking about what's going on around the conference, something that I think you, the listener, will really enjoy with not just great voices like Tim, but other guys that have played in the conference before. But, you know, I think there's a good place to start this because there is a team that is kind of looming over all of this, right? And when I say looming, I mean it because they got a 7'4" center, a guy that looms over everything, and Zach Edey, and that's Purdue. And I'm curious, Tim, this is a program that has been consistently really good for a long time. Do you think this is a national title contender this year?
I do, and I think something that works with if you quote me, if you look back on the previous national title teams or the guys that reach the Final Four or make great runs. Obviously you have the one Cinderella story that always happens every year, but the guys that are consistent are guys that have been there before. And they consistently make the tournament every year. They consistently make a run because those guys now get a taste of what it is to be in the NCAA tournament, where it is you play Thursday, Saturday, or Friday, Sunday, go back, come back, do it again. And then, you're getting the hype and the publicity and everybody's telling you how great you are. Everybody's filling out their bracket, telling you, hey, we need you to do this and do that. To be somebody that's been there before plays a huge part. And obviously, it helps to have someone like Zach Edey that's, obviously National Player of the Year, that can do something that's been there before. That's is different than what most teams have. So that's always going to play a part. But obviously, when you look at that and you look at what the Big Ten is, the Big Ten has always had teams that have made the NCAA tournament that have been phenomenal, that have been special, that have beat up on each other during this conference to go into the tournament to be able to make runs.
Yeah, and this Purdue team especially, right? You mentioned Edey. They've been through the adversity too, and I think that kind of helps, right? The old "what doesn't kill you makes you stronger," right? They lose in the first round to Farley Dickinson last year in a big upset, and it's about how they respond, right? And how they respond is Zach Edey comes back. You mentioned he was National Player of the Year. Well, he's better, and he might be the National Player of the Year again. Frankly, I'd be surprised if he wasn't. And you can see that he's kind of taking it seriously, right? They all took that loss seriously. Everyone came back, and there's a group of guys, Braden Smith as the lead guard, Lawyer, one of their off guards. Like, these guys are shooters. They are confident, and a lot of them, there's been big percentage jumps, right, from the 3-point shooting last year. You see them all, guys that were shooting 33% last year, now shooting 36, 37%. Guys that were shooting 36%, shooting 39%. And Edey, as the focal point of it, he's unstoppable, right? I don't know that I've ever, I've been around guys that are really big, right, covering different teams. You see guys that are 7-footers all the time. I remember Penn State played Purdue at the Palestra game last year, and Zach Edey obviously was in that game, and I was sitting courtside. And I remember sitting there and just kind of looking up at him as like, this is the largest person I've ever seen in my entire life. There is tall at 6'10", 6'11", and then there's tall at 7'4". This is that level of size. And I don't know, I'm sure you've played against some massive guys in your day, but it is a whole other animal when you're looking at a 7'4" guy at center instead of a 6'10", 6'11" guy.
Yeah, because that's not something that you're going to see down the line. There aren't that many 7'4" centers across the country. And if they are there, are they as good and skilled as Zach is? And when he's a willing passer, he can finish around the rim. He uses both his hands. You don't have those guys across the country. So even if you do have someone that's 7'4", he's not to the ability of Zach Edey, man. And I think just Purdue, when you mentioned, we talk about Zach Edey, I'm trying to think about when I was playing, who could I bring in that was something like that was super dominant in the post, just taking away guards, because obviously the Big Ten has had phenomenal guards that have been dominant. But a big guy, the first name that popped in my mind was Jared Sullinger. You throw it to Sully in the post, it was like, what do? You got to double. He was a big body. He could face up. He could spin the body. He was something that you had to send double to. And that was the first name that popped in my mind when you talk about Zach Edey, because you have to double him. Because if you don't, it's going to be a long night. It's kind of like that pick your poison. What do? Or like when you were playing, like teams were playing Shaq back in the day. Hey, what are you going to do? We double them. We might give up a three, like you mentioned earlier about these guys shooting better from three, or we just let him go one-on-one and let him get his points and hoping that we're just going to stop everybody else from scoring. So it's a lose-lose situation. You kind of just have to roll the dice and just hoping that he has a bad night or that the other team is just literally just playing lights out.
Well, and you mentioned Sully, right? He 6'8", 6'9", like pretty big guy.
Right.
You mentioned how strong he was, and you
Right.
tack 7 inches onto that, and now you're getting,
Right.
you know what I mean? It's impossible. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things that when you watch Purdue play, it feels like him getting going is a little bit of an inevitability, right? Like
Yeah.
you can slow him down a little bit if you can get physical with him. We've seen in the past, some teams have just been so aggressive that like we've seen after games like the marks on his arms from like getting hit and everything, that fouls don't necessarily always get called. And it's because at that size, like defenses get away with a little bit more, right? He can get pushed a little more, he can get hit a little more, and it's not going to get called as much. And he's just kind of got to take that, and he rolls right through it. You know, they've got one loss this year to Northwestern. I believe they lost to Northwestern last year too, in a game that was really physical. It was really bruising and taxing on him. And I think that's a lot of what you kind of have to do, right? You just have to be so physical against him that you have to hope eventually the ref will stop calling the fouls because they can't call it every single possession.
Right.
And to some extent that will work. But again, sometimes no matter how physical you get with him, he's undeterred. You know, he's not like going to look at this and be like, all right, I'm getting hit. I'm gonna stop trying to post up. I'm gonna stop trying to score in the paint. Instead, he just goes even harder and he gets even more aggressive when he starts really attacking the rim. You know, the free throw shooting is so big with him because it's hard to shoot free throws at that size because it's not natural, right? Because you're closer to eye level with the rim, so your arc is different and you naturally shoot more of line drives, so they come off the rim harder and everything. The fact that he is a good free throw shooter is a testament to him and the work that he's put in. But you mentioned that touch around the rim. The fact that he can bully you over, and then also if you get into his body and get physical enough and you bring that double, that he can still go over the top, right, with a nice little hook shot. He can go off the back, off the glass. Like this is, I mean, frankly, this is my 6th year covering the Big Ten as a whole after covering Indiana for 1, Penn State for 5 now. Like I think he might be the most dominant player of the last 6 years. And I think that's one thing too, that fans should enjoy watching him now because this is not the kind of guy that comes around often.
Oh, not at all. You don't see that. And, you talk about a 7'4" guy that's, I mean, and from what I've heard, he's a good human being. And I think that plays a huge part in it too. Like, I feel like we're giving him a lot of praise, but he deserves it. He's a good human being from what I've heard. His teammates like to play with him. And it speaks to him as well to say, hey, I'm going to come back another year, because he could have easily went to try his chances in the NBA. But to say I'm going to come back another year because I got some unfinished business tells you what type of person he is, what type of man he is, and what he's trying to become, and what he leads by. So, and as fans, I think you're right. I mean, obviously the Big Ten is from top to bottom. You're going to get these stars. You're going to get these pro prospects as well because, there's just so many great individuals, so many top tier coaches as well, that they're doing the best recruiting to get some of the best guys. And so, but as a fan, you have to just enjoy this. I mean, I know Purdue fans are just excited about it. They're enjoying it as well, because I go back to when I was playing the Jawan Johnsons, the Etwan Moores, the Lewis Jacksons, the Robbie Hummels, as you see on TV all the time. Like, they've had a plethora of guys that you just seen that just they die by that gold and black. I think it's the gold and black or whatever they got going on. That's just so big for them and so big for their alumni and their communities. Just have another person like Zach Edey to be able to put your school on the map, so everybody across the country can see how great Purdue is and I think that's something that fans and even in the Big Ten as well should be proud of, to see that, Zach Edey is putting the Big Ten on the map right now. We might not be the best that we were back or a couple of years ago when we had 8 or 9, 10 teams in the top 25. But right now we got a team and we got a player right now that's putting the Big Ten on the map, and knowing that every time him and Purdue come to play another Big Ten school, it's going to be a great tough matchup.
Well, and you mentioned like the kind of the conference not having that same level of depth. I think this might be the I don't want to besmirch another team by forgetting to mention someone, but this feels like the best title contender the conference has had in a bit, right? Like because Edey is that good, and you look at some of their wins. They've beaten Gonzaga, they've beaten Tennessee, they've beaten Marquette. They beat Arizona. They beat
Yeah.
Alabama. Like, this was not an easy schedule. And you look, and their one loss is to a Big Ten team, of
Yeah.
course, because it's always to a Big Ten team. And naturally, it's a road Big Ten game, because you and I talk about on the nitty gritty all the time. It is like impossible to win on the road in the Big Ten,
Yeah.
especially once you get past like the top couple teams in the conference. And even this, like, best team in the conference, not necessarily running away with it, but like looking like a true title contender, and they still struggle with Northwestern on the road. And I want to talk about Northwestern a little bit, right? Because this is a team that we both have a little bit of familiarity with. I've covered Penn State playing them several times, including in the Big Ten tournament last year. But you have some personal familiarity with them too, right? Because Boo Buie is also one of the best players in the conference, one of the best guards in the conference. And you got that scouting report when he was like 10 years old.
Yeah, it's crazy to see like him right now playing for Northwestern because his brother, obviously his oldest brother, went to Taylor Battle, which is now a coach at Northwestern. He was a teammate of mine at Penn State, so like I just remember his Boo Buie, his younger brother, just around, just like coming to the games, coming hanging in the apartment, just hanging around. Like, yeah, we know he loved basketball. He was around. He would shoot after games. He would come to practice. Those type of things. But to now see him flourish in his own role, not as Taylor Battle's little brother. Now he has his own role. He makes his own shots. He's knocked down the number one team in the country. Like it's honestly like as an older, like, yeah, nephew. Like that's kind of how I feel. Like, yeah, that's my little nephew. Like, yeah, nephew, go out there and hoop, man. It's awesome to see him go out there and do some of the stuff that we saw his brother, which I saw firsthand do, like knock off big teams, make big shots, hit big time threes, get the crowd pumped. Like to see him, especially in that game against Northwestern, make time after time, big buckets, and take over that game. And you can only just imagine how much I can only imagine with how Taylor was feeling right there. Like he's got to get chills, feeling like, yo, I was doing this, and now I'm seeing my little brother do this. It's pretty awesome.
I was going to say that's got to be one of the most interesting things about this, right? Because Taylor is an assistant coach there. It is his job to coach them. Also, this is his brother, right? Like this is, you know what I mean? Like there's got to be a special sense of pride when he goes and watches him put up 31, 9-4 against Purdue in that overtime game to get that win. Because he is, and you mentioned it, like you saw Taylor doing this. There is a similarity to the way they play, like a fearlessness to the scoring. That I remember. So that was Taylor played and you played, just to age you a little bit more, back when I was in high school, lived in the area, would come over to games and everything. And there was, battle range became a thing, right? Because he would shoot from the logo and he would shoot from near half court. And Boo isn't necessarily always doing those things, but he is not afraid to take over a game. He is not afraid to, when things get a little bit tough, to decide, okay, this is my time, right? And I'm going to make this happen. And I'm going to will this team to victory. We saw it last year. And you mentioned this with Edey too. Like this is another guy who could have left, right? He could have, played professionally overseas without a shadow of a doubt, had a chance to the G League and everything. And instead, he is back for another year and producing at an incredibly high level. And frankly, like if Zach Edey weren't in the conference, this would be the guy I think that we talked about as Big Ten Player of the Year.
Yeah. Again, I'm go nephew, so it's just awesome to see him and just to see, obviously he's again we talk about another player that's helping the Big Ten, putting them, spreading the wings into the other conferences, into the across the United States about what the Big Ten has and what the Big Ten can bring. And especially when it comes to tournament time, like we want as many teams as we can get in, and because I know that we'll be able to make some noise, and that's what we've been doing as far as the Big Ten goes. But again, as far as Northwestern goes, man, they knocked off the number one team in the country. Obviously, they've had some losses outside of that, but again, when you look at it, the Big Ten is going to be up and down all season long for guys knocking off each other and being able to, because like I said, every time that you step on the court, you're going against a top whatever 50 team, top whatever 100 team may be in the country that is going to mean something. So again, and I'm proud of him, just watching, just to see that. I know Taylor is too, man, but just even to see how far Northwestern has come, from when I was playing and just till now, how they're more competitive, more relevant. Not saying that those guys weren't, but just even now that they're getting the more national buzz than they were back then. And you can tell how big this conference is continuing to grow from top to bottom.
Yeah, I remember back around that time, it was like oh wow, Northwestern made the NCAA tournament, and now it's becoming the expectation, right? Because of the coaching job Chris Collins has done there, and because of guys like Boo Buie and Brooks Barnheiser as a secondary scorer has really helped them out. A guy that had a big game against Penn State in the Big Ten tournament last year in Barnheiser. This is a team that is to be reckoned with, and one that it follows more of the traditional blueprint, right, for what you would look like if you were a team that makes the run in the NCAA tournament. Because with Purdue, it's like Zach Edey's usually the best big guys. They have to be on another level to go far, and he is on that level. But I think they're going to get to the tournament. They're going to have to rely on Braden Smith a little more because guard play can really take you far once you get down that road. Boo Buie is an elite guard, and he's the kind of guy that can go out and win you games. And they're not at the top of the Ken Palm rankings or anything right now. They're 68th, which is still very good. And a team, again, that I think will probably make the NCAA tournament as they get going. But I do think once they get there, and if they get there, they're going to make a run, or at least they have a chance to make a run because of the way they're built. And because they have that kind of guard, and I mean, this, you get to that level, it really is a lot about the guard play because it's about who's got the ball in their hands.
Yeah, you have to have special guards. You have to have a team that's playing the best basketball that it is at the end. And the biggest thing, you got to have somebody that's going to have enough, willpower and believe in himself to take the final shot and to make big shots. We look at it all season long. The teams fight, battle each other, bang, wins and losses. And then when we get to the tournament, we see these teams make runs in the tournament where we're looking at this guard like, oh my gosh, he can't miss. And oh my gosh, nobody can stop him. And that's what you need. You need a guard that's going to be able to really literally take over games. If it's not necessarily assist, scoring, and just making the right play and leading the team, managing the game. And I think that's what it's going to take teams the farthest when it comes to the NCAA tournament. We talk about Boo Buie, him as being a perfect example because he's already done it. And that's one of the special things about the Big Ten. You have opportunities to go against different type of teams, different type of styles that are going to prepare you for what the NCAA tournament is all about. Because there's quick changeover. You play one team and then boom, we're not from Purdue, we go to Illinois. From from Michigan, we go to Michigan State. There's so many different changes when it goes, and from Ohio State to Indiana. So we have to. You basically that win. You got to throw that win out the door and literally get ready for the next one because it's going to be another dogfight.
Yeah, and last year you mentioned that they did it, right? They beat Boise State in the first round, lose a close matchup to UCLA in the second round. But this is a Northwestern team that has those guys and is going to be ready for that kind of chaos, right? Because the NCAA tournament, the reason we all love it is because it is chaos, and you got to have teams that can kind of thrive in that kind of scenario. There is one more team that I wanted to talk about today, and that's Indiana, which has. I'm curious your thoughts on the way their schedule's gone so far. So basically, they've kind of beaten everyone that they should beat, right? Like all the teams that are behind them, and you look at Ken Palm, any advanced metrics, they're taking care of business there. But they've got losses to Connecticut, Auburn, a very close loss to Kansas that was at Assembly Hall, and they lost to Nebraska last night. When you've been part of plenty of teams, right, overseas, in the G League, in the NBA, at Penn State, when you kind of aren't getting over the hump, but you're taking care of business, is there this sense of, okay, it's got to happen, right? Like eventually you're going to get there. Or are you kind of fighting up against that wall as you are waiting to climb that mountain? Because, the metrics aren't a big fan of Indiana, despite them being 10-4 and despite them having 4 good losses for all intents and purposes. Like, what is that feeling like when you're kind of pounding against that wall, waiting to break through against literally any of the good teams that they're about to play?
I think you're at a standstill, which in my belief, I don't think is the best. But again, you look at the good side and the bad side of the season so far. Like you said, you're 10-4. The losses they have, they're losses that they were supposed to lose when you look at the numbers. But at the end of the day, they've won all the games they were supposed to win. So now you look at it now, like what's eventually now we're in a Big Ten play where everything is like you want to take care of home court. And it's hard to get wins on the road, which we talk about all the time as far as we talk about Penn State last year. But it's time to be able to somewhere we got to break through this wall. We got to break through this. Somebody's got to knock down the door to be able to get to where we need to be. Because now in the Big Ten, we have to win games on the road to achieve the goal that we want to do. So yeah, we can win all the games at home, but we got to win some games on the road, and we have to win all the games we're supposed to win. So I think it's mentality that you have to have. They say, hey, man, this is coming, but we got to continue to keep doing the things that we are doing because we won the games we're supposed to win. But now it's time to do a little extra. So if it's, putting up a little more extra shots, if it's running through the line here, if it's more defensive drills here, if it's more film or whatever it needs to be done. But hey, man, we're here and we're doing the things that we're taking care of business. But we got to do a little extra more because obviously we're not doing a little extra more to be able to beat those 4 teams right now. And not to saying that they need to win all 4, but hey, man, we can get one of those. And especially when you talk about now coming into the Big Ten, like we gotta, now we have the opportunity. These are teams that we played last year. We know what the teams are. We know what the coaches are. They're, so we have to be locked in and prepared to be able to, hey, we got to get some of these games that even though on paper we're not supposed to win, but I know that we're right there enough to be able to win those games. And that's what's going to happen.
Well, and I think they're really interesting too because they have that massive home court advantage in Assembly Hall.
Yes.
Right, like it is a phenomenal arena. I spent a year covering games there. It's one of my favorite places to watch a basketball game, to cover a game. And I think they've got that. They've got a Big Ten road win in their back pocket, beating Michigan. Like that's the one game that you could say maybe they weren't supposed to win that they won. If you want to pick one out on their schedule, so you kind of have one in your back pocket. You're feeling like you're at least in the middle of the conference. I'm curious to see. I think the biggest thing with Indiana is if they make a stylistic change at all, because you look, as everyone knows, a lot of modern basketball spacing the floor, shooting from deep. They're 352nd in the country in how many threes they take out of every field goal attempt, right? Like their percentage of threes that they're taking. And so that's a really low number, right? There are not many more D1 teams than that. And so I'm curious to see if there's a shift from like, okay, maybe some of these better teams that they're not getting over the hump against are just shooting more and better from deep, because I know this is going to sound very simple, but 3 at the end of the day remains more than 2. And I think getting more of those shots is going to be helpful because they've got the shooters to do it. They've got they're not necessarily deep with those kind of shooters, but they have guys who can make shots from deep and space the floor if they go to those kind of rotations. But yeah, I always wonder, and this is maybe a commentary on basketball in general, how much of this is just like they're losing the math equation right now of it. And I know there's an on-court product that has to be worried about still, but I think we've seen a lot of Big Ten teams really excel in this regard. You have to keep yourself on the level playing field with the math of it, with knowing like, hey, you got to get X amount of threes up per game to give yourself a legitimate shot at this, even if it's just to space the floor for the big guys, because they do have good big guys. Like Kalel Ware is really athletic rim runner, really good rim protector and everything. They just got to get that floor spaced out, I think, a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. I think, especially with the way the game is going, threes are going to keep you in games. I relate to the NBA. Like even when teams would get up big leads on Golden State, or even when they were down big to Golden State, we knew that, hey, the game, we could always get back into the game because they were going to continue to shoot threes. And eventually, hopefully Steph would miss. But at the same time, you flip it when you're up 15 to 20, like we know that Steph can make so many threes, and Clay and all those guys can make so many threes to get back into the game. So like that's exactly how it is now. Like the games don't change. Like as far as threes are, like you said, threes are more than 2s. They're going to count more. But I think now when you talk about 15 games in, can you change that style of play? And I don't know if that's the answer for this team now. That might be something that you can address in the summer and transfer portal or whatever it may be. But I think right now is you have to ride with what's got you there, because we're not talking about a team that's lost games that they should have won. They won all the games they're supposed to. And I just think that sometimes sometimes style matters, and that's going to be who you go up against. And if you go, like I said, if this team was to go up against a team that shoots nothing but threes, it's a tough way to go. Because, hey, at the end of the day, we're going to keep throwing it in. We're going to beat you on the glass. We're going to get you in the post. We're going to drive, make layups. And if another team is just coming down shooting threes and they're making them as well, and you're making, then obviously the team making threes is going to work. But I think coach is relying on the defense. As much as we can get down and we can score in the paint, but I think he's relying on the defense. Hey, we're gonna run guys off the 3-point line, or try our best to be able to force them into those guys that you said that are blocking shots. And I think that's his way. That's his way of trying to eliminate other teams from making threes. Is, hey, we're gonna run everybody off. We're gonna send them all to our big guys and go from there. But to be able to make a change right now, I think it's very tough. I don't know if that's what you were saying, but I just think that's a tough now to make it. And halfway into the season, especially coming in the Big Ten play, to say, hey, you know what? We're going to shoot more threes now. Because, at the end of the day, sometimes it might just be personnel. Or, guys are going through slumps, and sometimes it's hard to be able to say, hey, you know what, we need you to go out there and shoot 3 to 5 threes a game without the confidence to know that, hey, even if I miss my first 3, I'm going to knock down the next 2.
Yeah, and I think that's a large part of shooting that people kind of ignore, right? Like you can be as mechanically sound as you want. If you don't have the confidence, like it's not going to go in. And it's as strange as that sounds, that's a big part of basketball, right? It's just being confident from deep. You mentioned them running shooters off the line. It's interesting because I see the same thing. Like I see them trying to do it. It's just it's not necessarily working, right? Like they're giving up. They're 335th in attempted 3-point rate from opponents too. So it's one of those things where you wonder if it's like something that's just going to come back and not necessarily get them, but like that's going to be the thing that you're thinking about all year when you watch Indiana basketball, right? Is it that they're not getting up enough threes and that they're, try as they may, like teams are still, because they're closing out hard, like you said, and they're trying to funnel guys down low. The problem is they're getting the help defenses collapsing down, and then you give up the open
kick
corner
out
three
and threes, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like it's the situation where it's something that I think has to be addressed, like you said, probably in the off season, but still something I think that maybe you make the incremental change, like hey, maybe instead of collapsing down, like trust the big guy to block that 3 or to contest that shot, or instead of passing up a 3 that is mostly open for a layup that is going to be contested a little bit, maybe you take that 3, right? Like it's the little changes around the edges instead of like you said, you can't make those wholesale changes middle of the season. I think it's kind of impossible. It's something that teams just can't do at this point. Once you're
but don't get me wrong though. I do think now that always the best coaches and the great coaches are going to make some type of changes now, because obviously you see now the non-conferences to see what you have and what things are working, what's not working. So I think from there, the coaches definitely going to make some changes now to say, hey, this is the 8 or 9 guys or 10 guys that are going right now. So, and then from there, you're going to be like, hey, this is what we have. This is what we're going to go with. And this is what we're going to run with. So I think that's where it's going to come.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Like these coaches are going to make those changes and things are going to happen there. But we'll see. We'll see if there's a counter right from Indiana's end. That's part of the game of all of this. But I think that's a good place to leave it for now. If you enjoyed listening to this first episode, The Crossover, please leave those 5-star ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts. That always helps us out. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button down below. We'd appreciate that. You can find Tim on Twitter at TimFraze23. You can find me at Jon Sauber, JonSauber. You can find all my writing at centerdaily.com. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.